Hi friends, hope you're all doing fine. So this is our third session in consumers equilibrium. Here we will discuss disequilibrium and also a few numerical examples. First of all, what is disequilibrium? This is basically a situation wherein a body is not in the state of equilibrium or it has deviated or drifted away from the state of equilibrium. This state occurs due to a change in any of the factors influencing the body. In the case of a consumer, equilibrium is determined by the satisfaction or utility from the commodity as well as the price of the commodity. If any of these undergoes a change, the consumer will drift away from the state of equilibrium. Now, what happens in the state of disequilibrium? Generally, a body that has been forced into the state of disequilibrium will adapt itself or it will adjust itself in such a manner that it re-attains equilibrium. Now before we go into the discussion of consumers disequilibrium, let us recap the conditions for equilibrium. Basically there are two approaches. First is the cardinal utility approach, and in this first is the single commodity case. According to this, the marginal utility from the good should be equal to its price. In the case of two commodities, as per this approach, MUX by PX should be equal to MUY by PY should be equal to MU of money. Then the second condition is the budget constraint, that is price of X into its quantity plus price of Y into its quantity should be equal to money income of the consumer. Then the second order condition states that the law of diminishing marginal utility should apply in the point of equilibrium. Now let us discuss the ordinal utility approach. Here the first condition is that MRS XY should be equal to PX by PY. Then the law of diminishing MRS should be applicable. Now let us discuss the cases of disequilibrium. First, let's see the case of disequilibrium in the case of single commodity using cardinal utility approach. Basically, disequilibrium occurs when MUX is greater than or less than PX. When MUX is greater than PX, the consumer is getting more utility than the price paid for the good. So, the consumer will increase the quantity of the good, and by the law of diminishing marginal utility will come down and it will continue till MUX becomes equal to PX. Now, what if MUX less than PX? The consumer does not get utility or as much utility as the price. So, do you think any consumer will continue consuming? No, the consumer will retard or reduce consumption. So, by the law of diminishing marginal utility, MU will increase till MUX equals PX and equilibrium gets re-established. Now let us discuss the case of two commodities. The first disequilibrium situation is where MUX by PX becomes greater than MUY by PY. So the consumer can re-attain equilibrium in two ways. First, the consumer can increase the quantity of good X. Then what will happen? By the law of diminishing marginal utility, MUX will come down and this will continue till MUX by PX becomes equal to MUY by PY. Or the consumer can reduce the consumption of good Y. Now when the consumption of good Y is reduced, MUY will increase till MUY by PY becomes equal to MUX by PX and equilibrium gets re-established. Then the second situation is MUX by PX becomes less than MUY by PY. What will happen? Exactly the reverse. The consumer will reduce the quantity of good X if he or she chooses to adjust through good X. When the quantity of good X reduces, its marginal utility will go up, and this will continue till MUX by PX becomes equal to MUY by PY and equilibrium is re-established. Now on the other hand, if the consumer increases the quantity of good Y, MUY will come down and MUY by PY will reduce till it becomes equal to MUX by PX. For here, the consumer is adjusting only the marginal utility. This is how equilibrium is re-established in the case of cardinal utility approach. Now let us discuss the disequilibrium situation in the ordinal utility approach or the indifference curve approach. Here disequilibrium can occur first if MR of xy becomes greater than Px by Py. See here, the consumer can increase the quantity of good X or reduce the quantity of good Y or some of both. Now when quantity of good X rises and good Y becomes scarce, the consumer will be reluctant to sacrifice more of good Y in order to get good X. So MR of xy will fall till it becomes equal to Px by Py. Now if MR of xy is less than Px by Py, the consumer can increase the quantity of good Y or reduce the quantity of good X or some mixture of both. Okay. When this happens, MR of xy will start rising because X has become scarce and Y is surplus. So this will continue till MR of xy becomes equal to Px by Py and re-equilibrium established. Now let us discuss a few questions. Given are the details about Mr. R, whose budget equation is given by 6x plus 3y is equal to 100, and the table shows combinations of two goods which yield the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Now since the consumer is telling the same level of satisfaction or he is ranking the goods, we will have to use ordinal utility approach. Now let's see the solution. First of all, we need to know Px and Py. Only then we can compute the ratio Px by Py. We know the general form of the budget equation is Px into x plus Py into y is equal to m. Now on comparison, we get Px is equal to 6, Py is equal to 3 and Px by Py is 2. Now we are going to compute MR of xy. What is the formula for MR of xy? It is actually change in y by change in x, or the absolute value of change in y by change in x. You know, MR of xy is the slope of the indifference curve and the slope is negative, but we do not take the negative sign for this analysis. Now in the combination A, there is no MR of xy. Okay, because that is the first consumption. In combination B, MR of xy is equal to 4, in C 3, in D 2 and E 1. So when we look at the condition for equilibrium, MR of xy is equal to Px by Py. Okay, this is possible in case of combination D, because here MR of xy is equal to Px by Py is equal to 2. Then MR of xy at point or combination E is less than that of D because it is 1. In D, MR of xy is 2. So MR of xy is diminishing. So the second order condition is also satisfied. So the consumer is at equilibrium in combination D, or when Mr. R consumes 4 units of good X and 2 units of good Y, he will be in equilibrium. Now let us go to the second question. See, here we are given the total utility schedule of two goods X and Y of a consumer Mr. A. Okay, the price of good X is rupees 8 and price of good Y is rupees 10. Now there are two questions. First, we'll have to determine the level of equilibrium using the cardinal utility approach. The second sub question is, what will be the level of equilibrium if Mr. A is not ready or intends to spend not more than rupees 50 on each good? That is, Mr. A, who earns rupees 100 as money income, doesn't want to spend more than half of his money on each good. Now let us discuss the utility or the condition for the first part. We know what is mu of x. mu will be equal to the delta tu, that is tun minus tun minus 1. Using this, we find the mux for each unit as well as muy for each unit. And also, we divide by price of x and we divide muy by price of y, and we get mux by px and muy by py. Now you see, mux by px is equal to muy by py. There is in three conditions. First, when Mr. A consumes 2 units of good x and 3 units of good y, or the consumer can consume 4 units of good x and 5 units of good y, or 5 units of good x and 6 units of good y. Now, how will we define or determine the level of equilibrium? See, there is one more condition, the budget constraint. Now we will see how much money is spent in total, whether it is equal to rupees 100, that is the money income of the consumer, or not. In the first case, the consumer consumes 2 units of good x and 3 units of good y. So the budget will be rupees 8 into 2 plus rupees 10 into 3, which is 46, not equal to 100. So this is not the condition of consumer's equilibrium. In the second case, the consumer can consume 4 units of good x and 5 units of good y. In this case, let us see, px into x plus py into y will be rupees 8 into 4 plus rupees 10 into 5, it is 82, still not equal to 100. So this is also not the condition of equilibrium. In the third case, the consumer can consume 5 units of good x and 6 units of good y. What will happen in this case? The budget constraint says px into x plus py into y, that is rupees 8 into 5 plus rupees 10 into 6 is equal to 100. That is the money income of the consumer. So what? The consumer is at equilibrium here. So the consumer will be at equilibrium, or Mr. A will be in equilibrium when he consumes 5 units of good x and 6 units of good y. That's all. In the second part of the question, Mr. X doesn't want to spend more than 50 rupees on either good. So we know when the consumer is at equilibrium, when he consumes 5 units of good x and 6 units of good y. Now let us see how much money is spent on each good. When you consider the first good x, the amount spent is rupees 8 into 5 is 40. It is less than 50. So the consumer can buy 5 units. Now the amount spent on good y will be equal to rupees 10 into 6, 60 rupees. But that is greater than 50. So the consumer cannot buy 6 units of good y. So what can we do? How will we make Mr. A attain equilibrium? Let's see. See, the only way we can progress is through the single commodity case. According to this, mux should be equal to px, or mux by px should be 1, and muy by py should also be 1. This is attained when the consumer consumes 4 units of good x. When the consumer consumes 4 units, mux will be equal to px. So let us see how much money he has to spend. In this case, the consumer will be spending rupees 8 into 4 is 32, that is less than 50. So the consumer can proceed. In the case of good y, muy will be equal to py when the consumer buys 5 units of good y. So now let us see the amount. The consumer spending 5 into 10 rupees, which is rupees 50. Exactly 50. So the consumer can proceed. So according to the given constraint, Mr. A will be at equilibrium when he buys or consumes 4 units of good x and 5 units of good y. So Before we part for today, let me give you a few clarifications. In the second case, with the constraint that Mr. A can spend only rupees 50 on either good X or Y, I told you that he will have to purchase 4 good X and 5 of good Y. Okay. So according to this constraint, surely Mr. A cannot consume more than 5 units of good Y. But now consider the case of good X. Good X is priced at rupees 8. Okay, 1 unit of good X costs rupees 8. So when he consumes 4 units, Mr. A will be spending only rupees 32. So he will not be spending his entire money income. For he is spending rupees 32 on good X and rupees 50 on good Y. So in total he will be spending only rupees 82. So and he earns rupees 100. So you might be having a doubt. Mr. A has the possibility of increasing his satisfaction if he is able to spend the remaining rupees 18. Okay, he could have bought at least 1 more unit of good X. But I am telling you that he should not buy. Why? The reason is the law of equimarginal utility. See, what does this law say? When he is consuming 2 goods, then MUX by PX should be equal to MUY by PY. Now, in this case, when he is consuming 4 units of good X and 5 units of good Y, MUX by PX will be equal to 1. MUY by PY is also equal to 1. Why? Because the condition is MUX is equal to PX. So, this condition is satisfied. However, if he is consuming another unit of good X, this condition will be violated. Okay. Now, one more thing. The thing we say that the aim of the consumer is to maximize satisfaction doesn't mean that the consumer is going to maximize the total satisfaction. It means maximization of satisfaction for the price paid for the good. Okay. With reference to the price paid, he or she should maximize satisfaction. That's why this law holds. Okay. Now, if you are asking me any more thing about this law of equimarginal utility, I can't tell you because I didn't formulate this law. So, the thing why this law is most important is it relates the utility. It relates the utility to the price. So, this is all about our discussion on consumer equilibrium. From the next session, we will be dealing with the demand for a commodity. So, till then, thank you, and I hope the video was good and you enjoyed. Bye bye.